All right. Nope, it's us. All right, round 3 testing. All right, there we go. I am going to go ahead and call this meeting to order. It is July 23rd, 2025. I have 8:33. This is the Regional Transportation Advisory Group Committee meeting, and we will start with roll call.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Stacy Dupuy. Here. Michaela Owens. Brent Moore.
Here.
Tom Laws.
Here.
Cody Homan.
Here.
Alex Yen.
Here.
Bob Callahan. Lindy Lindstrom. Clay Tucker. Michelle Barron. Dan Lister. Deb Root.
Here.
Bree Brush. Deanna Dupuy. Katie Wright for Morgan Besaw. Here. Hallie Hart. Nicole Baird Spencer. Here. Andrew Glassbell.
Here.
Hannah Veal.
Here.
Ruben Flores for Liebelt. Troy Behunin.
Present.
Doug Hansen.
Here.
Daryl Romine. Heather Hill.
Here.
Caleb Hood.
Present.
Brian McClure.
Here.
Jason Van Gilder. Crystal Craig.
Present.
Clemente Salinas.
Present.
Mark Stoyer.
Here.
Rob Hartzog.
Here.
Brett Laird. Sean Nickel. Chelsea Johnson. Joe McMullen. Gabe Finkelstein.
Here.
Zach Pietmeyer. Mike Toole. Aaron Bogus. Jason Wild.
Here.
Stephen Hunt.
Here.
Miranda Carson. Curtis Lovelace.
Present.
Jamie Neal. Cody Lund. Is there anyone online or in the room that I missed or that came on after your name was called?
Yeah, Sean from the City Star is here.
Michaela Owens from Ada County is here.
Thank you, Sean. Who was the second person?
Michaela Owens from Ada County.
Thank you. Okay, so let the record show that Daryl Mine, Jason Van Gilder, and who was the third one? And Joe McMullen are present but are having audio issues, and hopefully we'll be able to participate more fully shortly. Madam Chair, we have a quorum.
Thank you very much. We will go ahead and start with item 2, open discussion and announcements. Does anyone have anything they would like to share?
Madam Chair, this is Tom.
Go ahead, Tom.
Just letting everyone in our tech know, if you didn't see the news last week, it was announced that ACHD won a build grant for $18.4 million. So thank you. Yeah, really, really excited. It's going to be for 4 projects on the Boise bench. a variety of roadway improvements, bicycle pedestrian improvements, and this is kind of stemming off of our RAISE grant that we received a couple of years back for design. So really excited to see these projects move forward to construction. I'm sure we'll have more conversations with our tech in the future of how we navigate those funds through the tip and so forth.
Congratulations. Any other announcements? I will go ahead and add one. He is no longer a member of our tech, but he has been in the past and was a chair at some point, I do believe. But Jeff Barnes, he's our former Director of Transportation for the city of Nampa. So I took his job. He's now in Water Resources. Has announced his retirement. His last day at Nampa will be September 15th. If anyone would like an invite to his goodbye party open house to make him deeply uncomfortable, please let me know and I'm happy to share that when we get it going.
Just to add to that, Jeff Barnes was a beginner engineer and I was a beginner planner in Washington State at the same city many moons ago,
Wow.
which means he should not be able to lift her.
I second that.
All right. Seeing no more open discussion, I will move on to the item 3 consent agenda. If everyone has had an opportunity to review it from May 28th, 2025, I will stand for a motion to accept the consent agenda.
Madam Chair, I move we accept the consent agenda.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Second, all those in, any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. Item 4A is an action item. It is to recommend the 2027 to 2033 Compass application guide. I will pass it over to Matt Carlson.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, good morning. My name is Matt Carlson. I am a principal planner here at Compass. Today, I will be presenting the draft 2027 to 2033 funding application guide update. This is seeking RTAC recommendation for Compass Board of Approval. It is an action item. Today, I will review the purpose and components of this guide, highlight the primary changes of the update, and go over the scoring and ranking process. This guide is provided in full as a supplemental attachment, accessible via the link in your packet.
Yes.
The application guide is the foundational document for the Compass project application process. It sets out the roles and responsibilities of all parties. It's meant to serve as a resource throughout the application process. It describes the call for project process and timeline. The priorities developed using this process ultimately feed into the allocation of federal and local funds, as well as the development of the resource development plan and member service requests. Included in this guidebook is information pertaining to the funding sources, estimates of the available funding amounts, the application schedule and deadlines, a sample application, and a description of the project scoring and ranking procedures, which is the focus of this year's update. So what's new? The update incorporates funding sources that were made available into the IIJA. The application has been revamped for the ease of use by the applicants, all of you, and ultimately the scoring process has been updated and improved by building on existing planning products and through the feedback of you all here at RTAC. I want to highlight the distinction between scored and unscored projects. Unscored projects include applications for local funds, which are the Project Development Program, the Communities in Motion Implementation Grants, studies, and the member service requests. These unscored projects are prioritized using the paired comparison process, which is identical to how we've done this in previous years. Turning to the scored projects, these are project applications for capital improvements and maintenance projects seeking federal aid funds, including the Surface Transportation Block Grant, Transportation Alternative Funds, and the carbon reduction program. Projects that align with a priority identified in Communities in Motion or the Long Range Plan, Communities in Motion 2050, will be given a CIM score. All projects will also be scored according to their contribution to the regional vision, goals, and objectives of CIM. Projects that receive a CIM score and a TIP score are combined into a total score for the application. The scores are an informative tool to help structure further discussion and decision-making to rank those projects. So now we'll go into the scoring criteria. It combines a number of Compass planning products structured around the regional vision and goals as described in the long range plan. These criteria provide an objective evaluation of a project's impact that can help foster conversations and facilitate comparisons between projects. Safety has been emphasized in the scoring criteria for several years now and receives the most points, but Compass priorities and goals are all represented. Additionally, local preference and project readiness are captured in the bonus scoring section. After using the scoring process this year, Compass staff and RTAC understood that it could be improved again. The scoring criteria used to evaluate project applications were updated with the assistance of an RTAC subcommittee, including representation from the Ada County Highway District, Valley Regional Transit, and the cities of Eagle, Caldwell, and Nampa. The subcommittee met twice and reviewed all components of the guide, but the majority of the changes were on the scoring supplemental and the application process because these are the keys for you to apply for federal funding. You've seen this before. This is just a breakdown of the scoring. The three categories are the CIM 2050 project score, the alignment with the CIM 2050 goals and objectives, and the project readiness, aka bonus points. The scoring process is fleshed out by detailed criteria and thresholds customized for each primary mode and then tested with sample projects. The scoring process is underpinned by detailed criteria for roadway, active transportation, and public transportation. This criteria integrates a number of Compass planning products, some of which you see on the screen here. They include the CIM 2050 goals and priorities, the Regional Safety Action Plan, regional safety data, the Congestion Management Process Toolkit, the I-84 Operations Plan, the Treasure Valley TISMO Plan, Pavement, Bridge, and Facility Condition, the Complete Network Policy, Compass Equity Analysis, the Compass Environmental Index, the Compass Bike Walk Network, Pathway Facility Condition that's collected by the Compass Data Bike, and others. So all these planning tools contribute to the evaluation of project applications. Here's the summary of the changes that were made to the scoring supplemental and applications for this year. The member service request process has been added to the application to streamline it. You heard an update a few meetings ago from Marianne that went into essentially the UPWP member service request was going to change, and this is how it changed. It is now part of the Compass application guide, and we use the same application for those Compass service requests. There is a February date for these UPWP member service requests. This is for any Compass services that will require 5 days or more of Compass staff time. The CIM 2050 score percentage was dropped. You may remember that this was a percentage score based on the modeling score that a project corridor received when CIM 2050 was developed. Last year, we used a 20% score. The previous year, it was 10%. So now this CIM score is just a maximum of 10 total points. And it receives the full 10 points if the project corridor is listed as a priority project. It receives 5 points if it is listed but not a prioritized corridor. And if it's not in CIM at all, it gets 0 points. The RTAC subcommittee also recommended that when the project applications for federal funds, aka phase 2, are presented to you for ranking, we add a call-out column in the ranking list that provides a little bit more of like a qualitative analysis and potential tiebreaker. So it will list what plans the project is listed in, including CIM, the TISMO plan, the Regional Safety Action Plan, the I-84 Operations Plan, and any other local plans. This question is asked in the application, so we already capture that data. It will just be called out in the rankings. The phase 1 and 2 applications have been simplified for the applicants, and Compass will provide the applicants with some necessary data so that they can confirm those answers to those questions. So we believe this process offers a number of benefits, including increased integration across Compass planning activities. The process should improve the alignment of short-range TIP funding decisions with the long-range planning priorities identified in CIM. Additionally, this process integrates several Compass planning products leveraging existing resources. As I've referenced, this process will help structure conversations and the comparison of project applications by providing a sketch of the project impact based on these objective criteria, while preserving the flexibility and the ability to recognize support and local priorities, as well as improving our performance-based planning efforts, which is a federal requirement. So we hope we've streamlined the application and improved the experience for all of you. Moving forward, we seek your recommendation today so that this can be brought to the board in August, and we are ready to open the first call for project applications in September. Those UPWP member service requests will open in February, and then there will be a second application opportunity for those local funds in April for project development program and communities in motion implementation grants. If someone from the subcommittee has anything to add at this point, that'd be greatly appreciated. And with that, I'll open it up for any questions or comments.
Thank you, Matt. Any questions?
Madam Chair.
Yeah, go ahead.
Matt, can you go back to your timeline? The only question I had is, was there any conversation, I mean, first call for projects, UPWP request, and then second call for open project, there's just a lot of deadlines there that are in there. Will you be able to submit your UPWP requests at any time, like up from September up to February? Or is it three separate submittal processes is a lot?
Madam Chair, Nicole, that's correct. So you can submit a UPWP request at that first call in September. It was during the subcommittee discussions, it was requested that we maintain at least a February deadline, essentially an up to deadline, because some local agencies, when they set their budgets in the summer and fall, I think, Crystal, can you go into that a little bit more? I believe it was budget setting process, and in September, it's too late for that fiscal year, right? And so you wanted to be able to submit those requests in February to get them into the following fiscal year. Is that correct?
That is correct. And I do believe it also follows the federal fiscal years a little bit better. So most of our budgets go in action October 1st across the board. And so this just gives us a little bit more of an opportunity to know what federal funds each agency's already received, and then apply for additional funds for the ones that did not get funding.
Thank you. Madam Chair, Nicole, also just to clarify, although it does look like there's essentially three deadlines here, the only hard deadline for federal funds is that September application period. So you could apply for UPWP member service requests from September all the way to February, and you could even apply for PDP or CIMI funds in September, and we would just hold the applications until April.
Just a quick follow-up. For those that don't know, the closing for that first call is November, correct? So, and the closing for the second, the April is
May.
Correct?
Correct.
Thanks, Nicole. I'm going to go ahead and make a comment. I was part of the subcommittee, what it was called, part of the team that was looking at this, and I want to give Matt a commendation. You handled all of the strong personalities in that room very, very well. We all had it was a good active dialogue, I think, from everybody involved, and there were a lot of different discussion points on how this would affect long-term, short-term, how it aligned with communities in motion versus, how the public wants maintenance versus safety versus what type of projects they want. So you did a really good job. There were a lot of moving parts to navigate through, and I think this accurately represents what the subcommittee was going for.
Thank you very much.
Any other comments and questions?
Madam Chair? Go ahead, Stephen.
I just would echo that just want to let folks know that as we went through the subcommittee process, was impressed with the way Compass was able to accommodate concerns, and I think that the proposal meets those very well.
Thanks, Stephen. Go ahead.
This is Tom. I had a follow-up question related to Nicole's comment. I'm curious, did Compass consider or could we postpone the UPWP request deadline to align with that second call? And so have it open in April and end in May as well. So that way, at least there's 2 submittal deadlines, November and May. Or does Compass need the UPWP request? in that February one?
So, Madam Chair, Tom, yeah, if we did think about that, but the input from the subcommittee was at least having that February deadline. If we wait until May, that kind of interferes with the development of the following fiscal year's UPWP because it's already under development at that point. So that was the decision not to have it with a May deadline because it would be too late.
Madam Chair, can I follow up to that?
Yeah, go ahead, Nicole.
How many applications do you get in the first call versus the second call? Is there an opportunity? I just think as local jurisdictions, and I don't deal with federal dollars like you do, Crystal, but having too many deadlines becomes a little bit of a challenge with everything else going on. Does it make sense to make that second call align with the UPWP requests and provide just a more streamlined process? Because I understand why you can't move the UPWP. I mean, because that's really in your budget development process. But are you getting more applications? How do your applications split? Do they split more in the fall with a few coming in the spring? Or is the majority and lion's share of your new submittal requests coming in the spring submittal?
Madam Chair, Nicole, so this most recent year, the majority of the applications were received in the spring. I want to say we received maybe 4 or 5 in that first call in November. The last 2 years, our applications for those local funds, PDP and CIMI, were very, very limited. I think we received 4 last year and 5 the previous year, with all of them coming in at the spring deadline.
Any other questions for Matt? All right, will you put the action item back up for us? If there are no other questions, I will stand for a motion.
Madam Chair, I move that we approve the 2027-2033 funding application guide.
Motion, do I have a second?
Second?
Motion and a second. Is there any additional discussion? Before we move into a vote, can I just clarify that the motion is to recommend that the Compass Board of Directors approve the funding application guide, not that RTAC is approving it?
Correct.
All right, and clarify the second's okay with that?
Yes.
All right, we got a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed?
Aye.
All right, motion carries. Matt, you can just hang out on up there because it's going to be the Matt show for a little bit. Action item 4B is recommend the FY 2026 Communities in Motion Implementation Grants and Project Development Program projects. And go ahead and keep going, Matt.
All right. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I am still Matt Carlson, Principal Planner here at Compass. This is the presentation of the FY 2026 Communities in Motion Implementation Grants and Project Development Program rankings. This item is seeking RTAC recommendation for Compass Board approval and is an action item. This is what you've all been waiting for, I'm sure, too. That's why you're all here today. Today, we will go over the ranking process, their preliminary rankings, and the next steps moving forward. The Compass Resource Development Program identifies Compass member needs through the application process. Previous item we just talked about. And those member needs are then brought into the Resource Development Plan, which then funnels those needs into the appropriate funding sources. Today, the Communities in Motion Implementation Grant Program and Project Development Program. This is the timeline of the application process. We opened the second round of applications from April to May. You all did a paired comparison ranking process from June 4th through June 18th. And now you will recommend the projects in their final rankings for approval by the Compass Board. Criteria knits together a number of Compass planning products and are structured around the regional vision and goals described in Communities in Motion. These criteria provide an objective and replicable evaluation of project impacts that can help foster conversations and facilitate comparisons between projects. And just to make it clear, these projects follow the paired comparison ranking process. These are the applications for Communities in Motion implementation grants. We received 10 applications from 6 member agencies. These are the applications for the project development program. We received 9 applications from 4 member agencies. These are the preliminary rankings for Communities in Motion implementation grants after the paired comparison process that you all did with the number of times the project was selected as that score in the right-hand column. RTAC can now adjust these rankings at this point. There is a tie in gold that I ask RTAC to vote to break. The green line marks the funding cutoff, as we currently have funding to fund the top 2 projects. But I do want to mention that Compass has submitted for additional planning funds through the end of year distribution program. And there is a chance, there's no guarantee, but there is a chance that more funding becomes available, which is why we rank these projects all the way down the entire list at the very end. If these funds do become available, then they could be used to fund the next project on this list. So number 3. Madam Chair, if you'd like to have a discussion at this point and break the tie, that would be appreciated.
Absolutely. Thanks, Matt. I'll go ahead and go first before I solicit anybody else's feedback, since City of Nampa is one of those tiebreakers. Both of in my opinion, take that what it is, rank 1 and rank 2 are both located in Canyon County. I would like to see, therefore, I would like to see ACHD scored higher than Nampa so that we have a Ada County moving up on the list a little bit more.
Okay.
Both worthy projects, though.
I would like to chime in. The Communities in Motion implementation grant procedure states that if projects are all awarded in one county, then the following year, the following application cycle, then an effort will be made to award them in the other county. So just depending on the number of applications we receive next year, preference would be given to Ada County.
We're going to get more money, and Boise's going to get a project on there anyway, so that way Nampa's still eligible next year. Is there any other discussion and thoughts on this ranking?
Madam Chair, this is Tom.
Hi, Tom.
ACHD was going to elect that Nampa stay for 6th, but there's no opposition to your recommendation. So,
Thanks.
Madam Chair.
Yeah.
I feel you should arm.
Will you say that again? I didn't catch it.
I feel you should arm wrestle for this.
There we go. Any other thoughts? We've got to vote both ways.
Chairman, this is Jason with the City of Middleton. Noting that Napa is already number 4, their first project would already be ranked higher than, and this would be the highest ranked ACHD project. And the list does look weighted towards Canyon County already. So that might be one vote in favor of ACHDs.
Thank you, Jason. For clarity and not to give away Matt's list here, but that specific project also qualified on the PDP ranking, and it was in the top 1. So it will likely be funded with the other programs. So even if there are additional funds, I'm assuming number 4 will become ineligible for this funding, and it'll move on to Eagles project.
Which in full disclosure is one of the funded in PDP as well.
I guess it doesn't matter then. I'm going to go ahead and, is this a motion for breaking or just a recommendation for breaking?
It's a recommendation.
All right, I'm going to make a formal recommendation for the ACHD project for the pavement bike ped counters to be scored number 6 on this list, and the airport specific area plan for Nampa to be scored 7.
Second that.
Thank you.
Thanks, Matt.
All right. These are the preliminary rankings for the project development program. After the compared comparison process that you all did with the number of times the project was selected as the score, again, on the right-hand column, I ask that you now adjust these rankings. There is another tie in gold. The green line marks the funding cutoff for this program, as we currently have funding to fund the top 3 projects. The same with the Communities in Motion Implementation Grant Program. There is a chance that more funding becomes available, which is why we rank these all the way down the list. We did apply for additional funding, planning funding through end of year distribution. And if that does become available, then we could fund the next project down on this list. However, I do want to make note that because the procedures say that a member agency cannot receive more than 1 award under each of these 2 programs, the next member agency that would receive that funding, if it becomes available, is number 8, Caldwell's Fiber Optic Network Plan, as Nampa and Eagle are already receiving awards under those number 2 and 3, respectively. That makes sense to everyone.
Matt, just for clarification, so according to that rule, the only other project eligible on this list would be slot 8?
Correct.
Any thoughts? I would love to hear from the City of Eagle on this one.
Madam Chair, Matt, are you looking to break the tie here too? I mean, it doesn't
Correct.
really make a difference.
It doesn't make a difference, but we do need to do it just for procedure's sake.
So procedurally, the city would leave them as listed, letting the excess right-of-way study be number 5, and the Eagle Road improvements number 6. That was our ranking and preference.
I would support that. Any thoughts on it? Tom?
Madam Chair, I agree. I do have a question, though, back to your original comment related to procedural consideration number 2, only 1 project per agency per program. So looking at both lists together, the only other sponsor agency that didn't receive funding would be City of Boise, number 3, Alpine and Latah. And I'm curious, with potential year-end redistribution funding, how would Compass look to spread that over the implementation grants or PDP program? Because I think to be equitable across all applications, it would make more sense in my eyes to put any additional funding towards the implementation grants to have the City of Boise receive one, then fund our number 8 recommended project in the PDP.
Madam Chair, Tom, so this has been in discussion internally with staff and our executive director. Ultimately, if that funding does go through, it will be the decision of the Compass Board Executive Committee on how to divvy that up. The recommendation that Compass staff has come up with is to fund the next project down on both of these lists. So number 3, Alpine and Latah Safety Plan, for an additional $50,000. And on this project development program, number 8, Fiber Optic Network Plan. The reason why we decided that is because the end of year distribution money is PL, which is federal planning money, and we could use it for a planning project, such as the Alpine and Latah Safety Plan. But some of these other projects here, essentially the way this would work is, even though it would be a CIM implementation grant, it would follow the project development program agreement. So it would be a Compass-led project, not a reimbursement grant, because it's that federal PL money. Does that make sense?
Matt, just for clarification and follow-up question on that, and RTAC has no authority in this, this would all be the Compass Board, but could we make a note that we would recommend, instead of funding the next project in each one of the different types, that we fund 2 additional projects in the CIMI one?
Yeah, you can definitely make that note, and we can pass that along
Right.
to the executive committee. In that case,
So probably be slot 3 and then ACHD's permanent bike head counters.
And that's where it gets a little bit messy because the permanent bike ped counters are actual infrastructure, not a planning project. So the PL money can't fund that.
Madam Chair. So the Communities in Motion implementation grants are local dollars that we use to do that, correct?
Correct. That's member dues.
So the other list, though, is these would be the projects that would be more in line with, is that fair to say, with the federal dollars coming in that we're going to use as balancing?
Correct. The reason why our justification and staff discussions have the Alpine and Lake Tahoe Safety Plan receiving funding is because it should be eligible for both programs. City of Boise only indicated they wanted Communities in Motion implementation grant money when they applied, even though it's a planning project. Technically would be eligible for PDP money, but they didn't check the box on the application.
That's really unfortunate.
Okay. Matt, I think you had our recommendation at least on the EDP ranking. Is there anything else you need on that?
If there's no other discussion, we can move on. We reviewed the rankings. We had a great discussion. And you guys adjusted the rankings and broke those ties. Following the recommendation today, the project rankings will go to the Compass Board for approval in August. Compass staff will negotiate those agreements with the awarded members in September, and then the first call for projects will open in September again, and we encourage you to apply. Recommended motion is on the screen.
Thank you, Matt.
Madam Chair.
Yep. Go ahead, Nicole.
I move the RTAC recommend Compass Board of Directors approval of the fiscal year 26 Communities in Motion implementation and project development program project rankings, with emphasis on if additional federal funding is available, that they focus on funding projects that are closer to the top of either list versus skipping to the bottom of it.
That's a good way. Thank you, Nicole. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
And a second. Any discussion on this?
Madam Chair, I agree with the motion. I think at the end of the day, these are considerations. And so our TAC, from my understanding, is allowed to deviate from that and agree with the motioner's motion.
Thank you, Tom. Cody did. Cody was the second. Any other discussion on this? This one got a little spicy. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed?
Aye.
I'm gonna take that aye as a for motion, not an opposed motion. And the motion carries. Thank you. Continuing on with Matt, we've got item 5, information and discussion. Receive an update on the status of federal grant programs.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I'm still Matt Carlson. This is an informational session on the current landscape of federal transportation grants. This was requested by our RTAC chair at the last meeting. We were going to do this in June, but the June meeting was canceled, so here I am. We will review the authorization bill, specific grant programs, and what the future might hold. The Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, known as IIJA, will expire in September 2026. I think we are all familiar with the levels of funding that this bill provided, including authorizing the biggest transportation bill in American history, including 15 new competitive grant programs. The transportation bill apportions and allocates funding of these various programs. While these two terms sound similar and are sometimes used interchangeably, they actually have different meanings. Apportioned funds means to distribute funds based on a specific rule or basis. These programs listed here are competitive grants, but they are required by statute or law to be funded and awarded. Apportioned. So this is the Airport Improvement Grant Program, Infra, the Safe Streets and Roads for All Program, SS4A, the Strengthening Mobility and Revolutionizing Transportation Grant, or SMART grants, and the Low No Emissions and Bus Facilities Grant Program through the FTA, also known as Low No. To allocate funding means to set it apart and hold it, and then choose to award it for specific purposes. While IIJA created these grant programs you see, the funding was allocated to USDOT, and then USDOT can choose to award and open or close these programs as they decide. So this includes a lot more grant programs that you're familiar with: TECT, the Thriving Communities Program, Reconnecting Communities Pilot Program, Neighborhood Access and Equity, Bridge Investment Program, Build Grants, the Active Transportation Infrastructure Investment Program, or ATIP, and the Charging and Fueling Infrastructure Grant Program, also known as CFI. So why are some grants being withdrawn or not posted? Because of what we just discussed about statutory or apportioned grants versus allocated grant funding. If those grants are allocated, don't align with the administration's current priorities, they can choose just not to open those grants for solicitation. They just don't post the NOFO. The statutory grants have to be opened for applications, and we have seen the administration modify the Notice of Funding Opportunity, commonly called the NOFO, and then open them for applications because they're required to by statute. To get into specific grants, these are the ones, in my personal opinion, that will likely not be available moving forward. The Thriving Communities Grant Program is highlighted here because we know it's truly gone. USDOT staff has told us this program's gone. The Neighborhood Access and Equity Grant Program was canceled through the OBBBA, or One Big Beautiful Bill Act, that was signed on July 4th. Any funds that were unobligated under NAE, Neighborhood Access and Equity, flat out withdrawn under that bill. These programs, in my opinion, might return with changed language. Charging and Fueling Infrastructure Grant highlighted here because, in my opinion, I think it's more likely than not that that won't be coming back, but these other two, the Protect and RTAP grant programs, I think may come back with modified language. Per discussions with USDOT headquarters staff, they have told us that we can expect these programs to be available in 25 and 26. That's the Bridge Investment Program, or BIP, and the Build Grant Program. For statute, we know that these grant programs will be available. Infra is highlighted here because the previous administration already took applications for FY25 and 26 and already awarded that money. So even though the grant program remains, they've awarded all the money, there's no money left, so there will be no more applications in 25 or 26. But Safe Streets and Roads for All, the SMART Grant Program, and the Low No Program all will be available by law. So what should you do to pursue grant funding? Keep pressing forward. Priorities may change, but our elected Congress people will still want to funnel money to their states and districts. We still have between 7 and 9 grant programs available, which is still plenty. What does the future hold? We can't exactly be sure, but we expect grant opportunities to continue going forward. It may have different flavors, but transportation investment continues to be a nationwide need. You may have heard rumors that Congress really wants to get ahead of the expiration of IIJA and have a new transportation bill authorization before the current one expires. We have heard through our national organization that Congress wants to develop the bill this summer and introduce it on Capitol Hill this fall. But just keep in mind that since 1991, Congress has never passed a transportation bill on time, ever. They've had to extend the expired bill 30 times since 1991. So just chew on that. I encourage you to stay motivated. Administrations change regularly and the funding priorities change with it. Do not sit on the sidelines. Keep applying and keep developing your projects to get ready for funding. Our region has done an excellent job of keeping the project pipeline moving. With the new administration, be cognizant of new language, terms, and priorities. Know your audience and write to what they want to see, including national security, reducing inflation, energy independence, jobs, manufacturing, and children and families. Any questions?
Madam Chair,
Go ahead, Stephen.
you mentioned FY25 build. That's already been opened and awarded, correct? Okay.
So for build, FY26.
I have a few questions if no one else is going to speak up. First, Matt, can you send out this PowerPoint? Very well done. It's very informative to our tech. I would love a copy of it.
Yep.
And then I have two questions. One is on the SS4A grants. So for the past, I don't know, like 2 years or something, we've been hearing there's an excess, there's too much money and not enough grants to give the money to, like, keep applying, keep applying. Has there been any talk about, and it's just went back into a pot of money, right? And then just the pot's growing. Is there talk about reallocating that pot to another one statutorily? And so they would just allocate the yearly funds, like all of the excess pennies that people haven't applied for?
Madam Chair, so the excess unawarded SS4A funds, moving that to a different grant program is essentially what you're saying. I have not heard of that. I can't speak to that because I haven't heard anything on that.
Okay. And then my second question is regarding Compass as a whole. So for the Compass legislative goals, how do the Compass goals align with making sure that we are supporting infrastructure grant funding at a federal level to help the locals here in Idaho?
You know, I'm going to defer to Amy on that one. Are you okay taking that? Thank you.
Okay, so Madam Chair, members of the committee, we are working right now, Craig Rayborn is working with all of your elected officials on revising next year's goal or next year's legislative positions. Right now, specifically working more on the state than on the federal level. But on the federal level, our positions currently really focus on increasing transportation funding, increasing I'm blanking on my word, being able to predict funding, the regular funding and not having it move up and down, and being able to have a dedicated funding source and not always pulling from the general fund. So we are advocating for that. We don't have anything that specifically discusses the grant programs, but more focused on increasing funding, making that funding more predictable, and then on some specific programs such as safety, rail, and others.
Thank you. Any other questions? Stephen?
Madam Chair, one other question. I stepped out for a second, so maybe you mentioned this, but did you talk about carbon reduction program funds?
I don't know. I'm pretty sure I didn't talk about CRP at all.
No.
Do you have any insight into that program?
I don't. No, my intent was mainly on the truly competitive grants. I'm not supposed to use the word discretionary anymore. Competitive.
Matt, I've got a couple more questions. Apparently I have all the questions today on this.
Well, you're the one that asked for this. So.
It's fair. It's fair. Is there anything we can do from a local level to help encourage additional grants coming out outside of continuing applying to show that there's needs in the, Treasure Valley and around Idaho? Is there something else that we can do to continue supporting that at a state level, at a federal level, at a MAT level?
Madam Chair, I would encourage you to reach out to the Idaho congressional delegation. We here at Compass, the collective we have strong contacts with the delegation staff. I do know that the delegation staff makes regular visits to local elected officials, mayors, county commissions, things like that. So at those meetings and those opportunities, those would be good avenues to advocate for grant funds.
Thank you. Any follow-up from Amy?
And Madam Chair, if I may, I would also recommend, first of all, seconding what Matt said, reach out individually. But also, especially for those of you who have elected officials that serve on the Compass Executive Committee, and then you clearly all have officials that serve on the Compass Board, make sure that they are aware of that need and are having those discussions when they are discussing their federal position statements as we move forward through the executive committee process and then the board process, to make sure that they make it on there as an official position statement, because that gives Craig and others kind of more legs to stand on when they're speaking with our congressional delegation. They have something to point to.
Thank you, Amy. Last question for me, I promise. And it's more of a request really than a question. Matt, would you mind putting together some form of like a white paper or quick fact sheet or a tips and tricks type of thing that would give recommendations to any locals that are applying to programs like this on trigger words that we should avoid, on comparisons, like a reminder that we need to be going back to the regional safety action plan if possible, and just like a helpful things to know for reminders as we go into the next grant season.
Madam Chair, yes, I believe that is something we can absolutely do.
Thank you. Any other questions for Matt now that I'm done?
Can I add on to that?
Please do.
I'd be really interested in seeing if there's any themes of other awardees nationwide. And maybe the best example would be most recently with the build grant, but with the new administration, what are the projects being awarded?
Love that addition.
Sure.
Madam Chair, Matt, I did have a question, or if you could give a high-level look at what the process of creating a new authorization bill has looked like in the past. You mentioned that Congress is not often on time with this. What does that typically look like? Is it just a lot of back and forth, or what has happened historically?
Certainly, that, Madam Chair, Alex, that'll be something that I can do some research on and send that out, assuming to all of our tech.
Thank you.
All right,
Thank you so much, Matt.
I'm finally done. Thank you.
Way to handle the hot seat. Our last discussion item for the day is item 5B. It's to discuss the potential impacts of Idaho Senate Bills 1140 and 1144 with Amy.
Morning, Madam Chair. I'm Amy Left. I am not Matt Carlson. And this item, just as Matt's was requested by your chair, in the May meeting, and was on June and then got delayed till this month. And it's to discuss the potential implications of Idaho Senate Bills 1140 and 1144. We'll start with a little bit of background, actually go further back than this legislative session, then hit a little bit on the bill contents, what some of the potential implications are of those bills, what Compass has been working on, Compass's long list of questions about those bills, looking for some clarification, your questions to add to that list, and then some next steps. So first, going back to 2024, which is really what kind of triggered what happened this year in 2025, House Bill 729 updated Idaho Code 40-708, which directed that highway user revenues, essentially the highway distribution account and property taxes, be used to support the operations, administration, maintenance, and construction of roads and bridges, or highways and bridges that primary benefit motor vehicles. This year, then, they came back to define what primary benefit of motor vehicles meant, and that was Senate Bill 1140. And so that applies specifically to the highway distribution account and ad valorem levies property taxes. And it defined them as projects that reduce traffic congestion, essentially things that are going to make our traffic move faster, improve traffic flow. And they provided a very specific list of the types of projects that were eligible under that. It says, specifically says including and limited to those types of projects. So keep that in mind, because we're going to come back to that in just a minute. And it also stated that bicycle and pedestrian facilities, may only be improved if they are collateral or secondary to a highway project or a project that will primarily benefit motor vehicles. Senate Bill 1144 was very similar. However, it was not limited to specific funding sources like 1140 was. It is in the section of code that deals with counties and highway districts. And so we'll get to that also in just a moment. But it had a lot of very similar language. Again, that bicycle and pedestrian improvements need to be a collateral or secondary benefit to road benefits. But it also states that non-residential collectors and arterials may not be reduced in width. We'll come back to that as well. So this leads to a lot of known implications and a lot more potential implications. Some of the known implications are fairly obvious. There's restriction on how funds can be used, limiting them to roadway projects that improve traffic flow. And there's a limited ability to implement bicycle and pedestrian projects specifically as standalone projects or projects that are primarily for cyclists and pedestrians. There also is a penalty for non-compliance, a fairly stiff penalty, up to $1,000 or up to 90 days imprisonment. So they're serious about this. Then there are a lot of other potential implications of these bills. The biggest really is kind of a catch-all. There's a lack of clarity, which can lead to a lot of different interpretations and a lot of different implementation. We could potentially see every agency implementing these and interpreting these slightly differently. There's also potentially a limited ability to implement a full range of transportation projects, and we'll get to that in just a second about what I mean by that. Ultimately, though, despite Crystal's request today, we really have more questions than we do answers. So I'm going to run through some of the questions that we have come up with or that we've received from some of you, but also I'll be asking for more questions that you have to add to this list. So be thinking of those as well. Our first question really deals with projects that are already underway. These laws went into effect on July 1st. There's nothing in the bills about projects being quote unquote grandfathered in. So we're not sure of the implications on projects that are currently underway. And if there is a sense at least that projects should be grandfathered in, there's also no indication of what that might mean. Does that mean it's under construction? Does that mean it's been obligated? Does that mean it's been planned? So there are a lot of implications for projects underway or projects potentially in a TIP or a budget or a capital improvement plan that are already moving through the process. Next question that we have, 1144, is under the section that deals with counties and highway districts. Does that mean that it does not apply to cities or to ITD? So for instance, could the city of Nampa do something that Canyon Highway District could not? We're not sure. The next is a series of different items that are lacking definitions. I've got just a couple of them on here, but there are more. One of the biggies is the word near. There are exceptions for bicycle and pedestrian projects that are near schools, near parks, or near designated bicycle and pedestrian facilities. But there's no definition of what is near. Is that a busing distance? Is that a quarter mile? Is that 5 miles? Is that you can see the park from the facility? There's no definition. Also no definition of a designated bicycle or pedestrian area. There's also not a definition of something to be improved from a bicycle and pedestrian facility. Is that just a simple minor improvement is not allowed? Or is that really big wholesale projects? There is an exception for things that are federally required, which at least in my mind would include things that are required for ADA accessibility, which could actually cover a lot of improvements to bicycle and pedestrian facilities, such as ramp improvements, maybe fixing a buckled sidewalk. But again, that's my interpretation. They also use the term non-residential collector. If you work in functional classification, that's not a thing. ACHD does use the term residential collector in their master street map, and you could by default kind of assume that if something is not a residential collector, then it is a non-residential collector. although they do not use that term in their master street map. And to our knowledge, no one else uses that term at all. It's not an official functional classification category. Obviously, you can make some assumptions. If there are houses, it's probably a residential collector. If there are businesses, it's probably not. But again, it's not defined and there's not a definition for that term. Also, we've gotten a question from actually a couple of our members about the reduction in width. It specifically says roadways may not be reduced under 50 feet and no reduction in the number of lanes. So I had a question from someone saying we have a roadway that's more than 50 feet. If the lanes are plenty wide, if we want to reduce the lane width, but keep the same number of lanes, keep the same maximum width, but maybe reduce to provide a wider shoulder or to provide pedestrian facilities, is that allowed? Because it is not violating either of those. So another question that is out there. Also questions on the impacts to other funding sources, specifically using local match, and very more specifically for funding sources, especially federal funding sources that are made for pedestrian projects or bicycle projects or competitive grants that are focused on those. If we bring in funding from outside the region that is dedicated to that type of project, is that allowed? Similarly, with working with developers, many of you will have require a developer to put in bicycle and pedestrian facilities, or that developer will provide funding to you to put in bicycle and pedestrian facilities in that development. Assumption is, on my part, that's probably okay, but again, we don't know that for sure. And then there is Idaho Code 40616, which I really honestly did not know existed until I started doing this research. Again, it is under counties and highway districts, and it specifically says commissioners are empowered to set outside of city limits a strip of land for a sidewalk or side path. Unsure how that fits in, because that seems to be in contradiction to some of the other language. Maybe they can set it aside, but can't improve it. I'm not sure. I was not familiar with that language. And then finally, the types of projects. As I mentioned in last year's legislation in 2024, and now in current code, it mentions maintenance, operations, administration, and one other thing. I'm blanking on what it is. But in the definition of primary benefit of motor vehicles, it has a very specific list that it says limited to, and it lists those types of projects, primarily capacity projects. Those two don't necessarily align. Is it and that they can do administrative, you can do administrative maintenance types of projects, as well as those capacity projects that are specifically listed, or does listing those types of capacity projects override the mention of maintenance administration? I believe the intent is that for you to be able to do both. But again, there's somewhat of a contradiction between the two pieces of legislation that make it somewhat unclear. So as I said, unfortunately, we have more questions than answers. And a lot of these, there are really honestly some common sense answers that many of you are probably thinking, why is this even a question? It seems pretty obvious. And a lot of them I think are, but there still is some either contradiction in the bills or not clarity that certainly could be used if somebody wanted to bring something forward and say, you know, this says exactly this, I'm going to complain to my legislator, whatever it may be, because you're not following this. So there is a lot of intent, which may or may not, or excuse me, a lot of the letter of the law, which may or may not necessarily align with what was intended, which leaves for a lot of the ambiguity and potentially some unintended consequences. So I'm going to stop now and ask all of you what other questions you may have in addition to this list. We'll get on to what we're doing with this list in just a second, but does anyone have other questions that have come to your mind or been raised in your agency in addition to what we've spoken about here that we should be adding to our list?
this is Jason with City of Middleton. Is this specifically the highway users funds in the state revenue that are House Bill 312 and 362? And or is this also the county road bridge levy funds? Or would this, if we combine them all into one fund with our property tax revenues, contaminate the property tax revenues, kind of like federal funds get contaminated with, if $1 of these funds get attached to all the restrictions, go to all the property tax? Or could we fund sidewalk out of property tax street fund, portion of the street fund?
Madam Chair, Jason, that's a great question. Senate Bill 1140 is specific to ad valorem levies, which is essentially property tax, and the highway distribution account. However, Senate Bill 1144 does not specify funding types. So that's a great question of kind of how you.
577-7757.
Nicole, you're talking to me. So that in terms of a mix of funds, my assumption is probably the 1144 would.
Yes, that is not a problem.
But that's a great question of how funds are mixed. But given that one of the two does not deal with specific funds, however, that one that does not deal with specific funding sources is also the one that specifies counties and highway districts. So there's always a chance that may not affect cities looking at you specifically. So a lot of ambiguity there, but we'll add that to the list.
Thank you. Is this something that would be, sorry, this is Jason again with Middleton, that would be subject to third-party enforcement? Or would this be just a state enforcement?
Madam Chair, Jason, I'm not sure what you mean by third-party enforcement. Can you clarify a little bit?
In the environmental world, there's the IDEQ can sue you for not following your laws, but if they don't, then a third-party environmental group could come seek damages.
Madam Chair, Jason, essentially, if I'm to paraphrase, are you asking if this would make an agency subject to lawsuits?
Yes, from citizens. Would a citizen enforce this, or is this something that only the state, the county prosecutor or the state attorney general, somebody would bring you complaint against?
Madam Chair, Jason, another good question. It does contain in there penalties that would be brought by the state. My assumption is that someone would be able to file a lawsuit if they felt that you were non in compliance. But again, that is my assumption, that an activist group, for instance, wanting to stop a project could potentially use this. But again, my assumption only.
Thank you.
Microphone.
Go ahead, Vince.
Madam Chair, Amy, imprisonment, 90 days and $1,000 fine. So would that go through the county prosecutor's office? Who's going to do that? Is the county sheriff going to go out there and put somebody in shackles and take them away and make them post bond? I mean, yeah, I mean, what's the does this got to go through the full rulemaking process now to actually develop a set of rules to implement all this? Is that I assume that's the plan, right?
Madam Chair, Vince, another good question, one I don't have the answer for. One we have discussed internally, but we will definitely add it to our list. Also going along with that of who is ultimately responsible.
Who's going to prosecute this, I guess, would be my question.
Yes, and who would be prosecuted?
Yeah, who's liable? Yeah, who's liable?
Great questions. We'll add those to the list.
I also do love that question because, I mean, if we use money out of the HDA account that is distributed by ITD. Obviously, they're at fault for giving us the money in the first place. So Vince is in trouble. Just kidding, just kidding. Amy, thank
visit you,
you.
Vince.
This has been very, very helpful. And I don't have any additional questions to list, but I assume if we do come up with one, we can email you to compile.
Definitely. Thank you, Madam Chair. And actually, that's perfect segue into next steps. We're continuing to compile our list of questions. So if you do have additional questions,
I had maybe one other question. Does
Good,
this,
Stephen.
how would this affect third-party partners for a highway district? So let's say CCDC is partnering with ACHD to do a project. Does that mean ACHD, like if CCDC is actually the one doing the project, is that still allowed?
Madam Chair, Stephen, that's another great question. And actually, that's one we've discussed internally and somehow failed to make it on my list, is agencies that are not the ones that own the roadways, also specifically agencies in Ada County, CCDC, or others. So that's a great question. We'll definitely add that to the list. We actually had discussed that early on and it kind of fell off the radar. So thank you for bringing that up.
How about another one? Does this affect planning for sidewalks and roads?
Madam Chair, Jason, another great question. That's one we don't think so, because this really seems to be addressing construction, especially, but if the state highway distribution account were used, there is a potential nexus there, but definitely a good question, another good question to add to the list. Thank you.
Any additional?
So if no other questions at this time, did you have another question, Crystal? Okay, no other questions at this time. Definitely.
One more.
One more quick
Go
one.
ahead, Vince.
I'm just curious, is anybody, and maybe ACHD is anybody addressing this individually as an organization to get clarity on definitions and alignment of terms?
Madam Chair, this is Tom. And I'll say that ACHD is fully committed to following the law and what we've been doing over the last few months, and I think there are some questions still to be had, is working with our legal counsel and our commission to better understand how we want to tackle these. We did have a commission item early June that discussed some of these definitions. I'd be happy to share that with our tech, but really the goal was to try to look towards existing definitions that either we are currently using or partners are currently using. So an example being, how do the school districts look and define their walk routes and tying that to proximity to schools? Or with Amy's example, pulling directly from our existing master street map to determine what roadway classifications feet are non-residential collectors versus residential. So still working through those, but yeah, I think there's a lot of knowns, but I'd be happy to share some of what we've looked at and discussed with our commission today.
Thank you, Tom. I think we would all appreciate that. Along those lines, we're continuing to solicit questions. So if you have more questions, you have clarification, please send them my way. We have also been sharing our questions, as I know a lot of you have as well, with members of the legislature. I know LTAC, and I think both AIC and IAC and potentially Association of Highway Districts as well have been also collecting questions. We have been told, at least anecdotally, that there will be a cleanup bill next year to try to deal with some of the ambiguity and some of the contradictions. So hopefully we will see that and that will help. But please continue to send questions because those will all feed into that discussion. Tony and her team have been looking at projects, looked at projects in last year's TIP just to kind of get a sense, and we'll be looking more closely at projects in this coming TIP, the 26 through 32 TIP. And they are also going to be developing some sort of a fairly simple, hopefully fairly simple checklist that we'll be able to add to the application process to be able for you as applicants and for Compass staff as looking at projects to fairly simply go through and check on alignment with these two laws so that we don't get too far down the road. So that will still be forthcoming, but that is a tool that we're hoping to be able to provide to you to help you as you're working through that decision-making process, as well as a committee and as Compass staff looking at scoring those projects as well. So quick recap. This really kind of started with last year's House Bill 729, which used the phrase primary benefit of motor vehicles. This year's attempt was then to define that, but it led to a lot of uncertainty, a lot of ambiguity, which can lead to a lot of different interpretations and a lot of different implementation from different agencies, not only within our region, but really throughout the state. The impacts are especially to those non-capacity projects. For the most part, capacity projects seem to be just fine, but non-capacity or non-roadway projects. And we're still working to seek clarity. We'll share with you as we learn more, and would appreciate as if you can funnel us your questions, but also share with us as you learn more, so we can all help educate each other and hopefully all move forward on the same page. So be also watching for that checklist from Tony and her team. And with that, I will be happy to stand for any further questions.
Thank you so much, Amy. The next item is 6A and B. It's our status reports. The RTAC agenda worksheet and the obligation reports are in your packet on page 14 and 19 respectively. Item 7, our next meeting, as a reminder, is August 6th. So that's just a short turnaround. It's not a month from now. The intent of that is to get the RTAC meeting in before the next Compass board meeting. So please mark that on your calendars and RSVP as soon as we get the email reminders to do so, so that we know we've got a head count and a quorum. With that, I will stand for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion, do I have a second?
Second.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks. Have a great day.